There is a method of execution so gruesome, so anatomically precise, that historians have debated its existence for centuries. They call it the blood eagle. There is a method of execution so gruesome, so anatomically precise, that historians have debated its existence for centuries. They call it the blood eagle. Imagine being restrained, face down, your back exposed to the biting cold of the North Sea air. You are not just going to die, you are going to be dismantled. Is this the ultimate truth of Viking brutality, or is it merely a ghost story, a dark myth invented by terrified monks to demonize the men from the north? Today, we open the history books and the anatomy books to find the truth. To understand the blood eagle, we first have to step into the world of the Vikings. The year is 865 A.D. The great heathen army has landed on the shores of England. These weren't just mindless barbarians, they were complex people with a complex culture. They valued honor, poetry, family, and vengeance. The Vikings lived by a code where an insult or a murder demanded payment in blood. Usually a quick death with an axe was sufficient, but for those who truly broke the codes of honor, men who killed fathers or betrayed kings, the sagas tell us there was a darker alternative. The Rista blood urn, the carving of the blood eagle. It appears in the Norse sagas, the semi-historical legends written down centuries after the events occurred. It is described as the ultimate ritual offering to Odin, the All-Father. But it wasn't just a sacrifice, it was a message written in bone and lung. The terrifying reputation of the Vikings was their greatest weapon. If an English village heard that the Vikings did this to their enemies, they would surrender before a single shield was raised. This leads us to our first major problem. Was the blood eagle real, or was it the 9th century equivalent of psychological warfare? To find out, we have to look at how it was supposedly done. Warning: the following description is graphic. According to the Orkneyinga saga and the Heimskringla, the ritual was a multi-stage process of surgical cruelty. Step 1. The victim is restrained face down. The executioner, often a relative of the person the victim had wronged, would take a knife, not an axe, but a knife. They would carve the shape of an eagle with outstretched wings into the skin of the victim's back. Step 2. This is where the horror truly begins. The skin flaps are peeled back to reveal the rib cage. Using an axe or a hammer and chisel, the executioner would sever the ribs from the spine, one by one. Step 3. The ribs are pulled outward, forcibly bent to the sides. In the open wound, the white bones jutting out resemble the pinions of wings. And finally, step 4. The lungs are pulled out through the opening. They are draped over the wings of the ribs. As the victim, who is theoretically still alive at this point, gasps for their final breaths, the lungs flutter like the wings of a bird. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? Could a human body actually endure that? Could someone remain conscious long enough for the lungs to be removed? We will get to the modern science in a moment, but first, who deserved such a fate? The most famous account of the blood eagle involves the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. You might know him from TV shows or movies. Legend says Ragnar was captured by King Aella of Northumbria. Aella threw Ragnar into a pit of vipers, where the Viking hero died laughing, promising that the piglets would grunt when they heard how the old boar suffered.
The piglets were his sons, Ivar the Boneless, Bjorn Ironside, and Ubba. When the sons of Ragnar invaded England, they didn't just want land, they wanted Aella. In 866 AD, they captured the king. The tale of Ragnar's sons describes what happened next perfectly. They caused the bloody eagle to be carved on the back of Aella, and they cut away all of the ribs from the spine, and then they ripped out his lungs. Another victim was Halfdan Longleg, a son of King Harald Fairhire. The Orkneyinga saga tells us that Earl Einar carved the eagle in Halfdan's back as a sacrifice to Odin. Notice a pattern here. These victims were royalty, kings and princes. The blood eagle wasn't for common thieves, it was a ritual of status. It was about reclaiming honor from a high-value target. But here is where the cracks in the story begin to show. Most of these sagas were written in the 12th and 13th centuries, hundreds of years after the Viking Age ended. They were written by Christians, often in Iceland. Why does that matter? Because Christian writers had a motive.
Let's look at the argument against the blood eagle. Many prominent historians, like Roberta Frank, argue that the blood eagle never happened. They believe it is a result of a simple linguistic mistake. Old Norse poetry is famous for being cryptic. It uses metaphors called kennings. There is an ancient stanza describing the death of Aella that says, "The eagle mutilated the back." In the original context, this likely just meant that Aella was killed, and his body was left on the battlefield for the carrion birds, the real eagles, to eat. This was a standard poetic way of saying he lost the battle. But centuries later, when medieval writers were transcribing these poems, they may have taken the metaphor literally. They read, "The eagle mutilated the back," and imagined a specific method of torture. They turned a scavenger bird pecking at a corpse into a specific, ritualistic execution. Furthermore, think about the Christian monks writing these histories. They wanted to portray their ancestors as pagan savages and themselves as civilized and enlightened. What better way to villainize the old gods than to invent a ritual where you rip a man's lungs out? It fits the evil barbarian trope perfectly. For decades, this was the accepted academic view. The blood eagle was a myth, a translation error, a literary fantasy. But in 2022, a team of doctors and historians decided to check the math. A study published in Speculum, the Journal of Medieval Studies, by researchers from Kiel University, asked a simple question: is it anatomically possible to perform a blood eagle? Using modern anatomy software and historical tools, they modeled the procedure. Their conclusion? Yes, it is possible. They found that using a Viking-age spearhead or knife to unzip the ribcage from the back would work. However, they noted that the victim would die very quickly. Specifically, once the lungs were collapsed or the diaphragm was breached, the victim would suffocate within minutes, perhaps seconds.
Observe this
So,
mark on
the
the
part about the
bone.
lungs fluttering
This is a
while the
key
victim
indicator
watched,
for our
that is likely
analysis.
exaggeration. They would have been dead or unconscious long before that final stage. But the physical act of opening the back and displaying the ribs, entirely doable with the tools of the time. The study concluded that while we can't prove it did happen, we certainly cannot dismiss it as impossible. The Vikings had the knowledge, the tools, and undeniably the stomach for it. So, where does that leave us? Legend or fact? Perhaps the answer lies in the middle. Maybe the blood eagle was extremely rare, a ritual performed only once or twice in history, which made it so shocking that the story echoed for 1,000 years. Or maybe it really was just a mistranslation, a ghost story that got out of hand.
But whether it happened or not, the blood eagle achieved its purpose. Over 1,000 years later, we are still talking about it. We are still shuddering at the thought of the eagle's wings. And in that sense, the Vikings obtained their immortality. The next time you hear the wind howling through the trees, sounding like a gasp for breath, remember King Aella, and remember the blood eagle.